Preston Vance thought his platinum status gave him the right to judge everyone. When he saw a quiet man in a hoodie sitting in seat 1B, he didn't see a fellow passenger. He saw a target. For 2 hours Preston belittled, ignored, and threatened to kick the man off the plane, convinced he was sitting next to a nobody. But Preston made a fatal mistake. He didn't know that the man he was trying to remove wasn't just a passenger. He was the brilliant engineer who designed the very wings keeping them alive, and the new owner of the airline. What happens when loud money meets quiet power? The humiliation at 30,000 feet is something Preston will never forget. Watch the instant regret unfold. The air conditioning in Terminal 4 hummed with the specific sterile frequency of international travel. But at the entrance to the Sovereign Alliance first-class lounge, the noise was entirely human. Preston Vance, 48 years old and wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than most people's cars, was not having a good morning. He stood at the reception desk, his knuckles white as he gripped his Platinum American Express card. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Preston hissed, leaning over the marble counter. The vein in his temple throbbed in time with the notification sounds pinging from the smartphone in his other hand. "I fly this route twice a month. My firm spends $2 million a year with this airline." The desk agent, a young woman named Chloe who had been working a double shift, kept her smile frozen in place. "I understand, Mr. Vance. But the system is showing your membership has a flag on it pending renewal. I just need to call the supervisor to override it. It will take 2 minutes. 2 minutes is $2 million in my world." Preston slammed his hand on the counter, causing a jar of complimentary mints to rattle. 10 feet away near the frosted glass doors, a different kind of interaction was taking place. Marcus Thorne stood quietly by a decorative planter. He was 55, a tall man with broad shoulders and graying haircut close to his scalp. He wore a faded navy blue zip-up hoodie with a small university logo on the breast, beige chinos that had seen better days, and comfortable running shoes. He held a beaten-up leather satchel in one hand and a thick hardcover book in the other. He wasn't looking at the commotion. He was looking at a young mother struggling with a stroller nearby. One of the wheels had jammed sideways, and her toddler was starting to wail. "Here," Marcus said softly. His voice was deep, a rumble of calm in the chaotic terminal. "Let me get that for you." The mother looked up, startled. She saw a black man in casual clothes and hesitated for a fraction of a second. A reflex Marcus had seen 1,000 times. But then she saw his eyes. They weren't angry or weary. They were precise. Marcus knelt. He didn't just kick the wheel. He reached down, his long fingers finding the locking mechanism instantly. "It's the torsion spring," he murmured, more to himself than her. "It catches on the plastic guard if you fold it too fast." With a deft click, he released the tension and aligned the wheel. He stood up and smiled. "Smooth sailing from here, ma'am." "Thank you," she exhaled, relief washing over her. "You're a lifesaver." Do you work for the airport?" Marcus chuckled softly. "No, just an engineer who hates bad design." At the desk, Preston Vance snatched his boarding pass from Chloe. "Finally. Next time have your system ready before I get here. Competence isn't that hard to find, is it?" Preston turned sharply, straightening his silk tie, and marched toward the lounge doors. He brushed past Marcus without breaking stride, his shoulder checking Marcus's arm. Preston didn't stop. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look. To Preston, Marcus was just part of the background scenery. Static noise in his high-frequency life. Marcus watched Preston storm into the lounge. He pulled a small black Moleskine notebook from his back pocket. He clicked a cheap ballpoint pen and wrote a single line. "Customer Service Desk, Terminal 4. Staff abuse protocol insufficient. Agent lacked authority to de-escalate." He closed the notebook, scanned his own boarding pass at the automated gate, and walked through the doors. The boarding area was a segregated ecosystem. Zone 1 passengers stood on the plush red carpet. Everyone else stood on the gray linoleum. Preston was, naturally, at the front of the red carpet. He was on a call now, his voice projecting so everyone within a 30-foot radius could hear his business. "Listen to me, Todd," Preston barked into his AirPods. "I don't care about the ethics committee. The merger with Horizon Tech is about survival. If we don't acquire their automation patent, we are dinosaurs. Cut the engineering team by 40% if you have to. Just get the numbers to work before I land in LA. Standing behind him in the queue was Mrs. Eleanor Abernathy. She was 62, dressed in a Chanel tweed jacket and pearls, holding a small dog carrier. She had been raised in a version of America where discussing money in public was considered as vulgar as chewing with your mouth open. She stared at the back of Preston's head with polite disapproval. "Excuse me," Mrs. Abernathy said, tapping Preston on the shoulder. "You're blocking the path for the wheelchair assistants." Preston didn't turn around. He just waved a hand dismissively behind him. "In a minute, lady. I'm on a conference call." Mrs. Abernathy stiffened. "Well, I never." Marcus stepped up from behind Mrs. Abernathy. He was third in line. "Allow me," he whispered. He gently guided the elderly passenger in the wheelchair around Preston's blockade, moving the barrier tape with practiced ease. Preston didn't notice. He was too busy explaining to Todd how to get a pension fund. When the gate agent announced boarding for first class, Preston surged forward. He scanned his phone and marched down the jet bridge. Mrs. Abernathy scanned her ticket and looked back at Marcus. "You have the patience of a saint, young man," she said. Marcus smiled, a small cryptic expression. "Not a saint, ma'am. Just an observer." The cabin of the Boeing 777 was a sanctuary of beige leather and ambient lighting. Sarah, the lead flight attendant, stood at the door. She had been flying for 15 years and could spot a trouble passenger from the way they walked down the bridge. She saw Preston Vance and mentally sighed. He was a regular. The kind of regular who knew the employee handbook better than the new hires and used it as a weapon. "Welcome back, Mr. Vance," Sarah said, forcing warmth into her voice. "Seat 1A as always." Preston didn't make eye contact. He thrust his suit jacket at her. "Hang this up. And bring me a sparkling water with lime. No ice. Last time it was lukewarm." "I'll take care of that right away," Sarah said, taking the jacket. Preston settled into seat 1A, kicking his legs out. He immediately opened his laptop, spreading documents across the shared center console, effectively claiming 70% of the space between seat 1A and 1B. A moment later, Marcus boarded. He nodded to Sarah. "Good morning." Sarah blinked. Most passengers looked through her. This man looked at her. "Good morning, sir. Welcome aboard. Can I see your boarding pass?" Marcus showed her his phone. Seat 1B. Sarah checked it. A full-fare first-class ticket. One way. Purchased yesterday. It was odd. He didn't look like the typical full-fare passenger. His hoodie was clean but frayed at the cuffs. His sneakers were practical, not fashionable. But his demeanor was calm. "Right this way, Mr. Thorne," Sarah said. Marcus walked to the first row. Preston was currently using the tray table of seat 1B as a coaster for his sparkling water. "Excuse me," Marcus said softly. Preston was typing furiously. He didn't look up. "Delivery entrance is at the back, pal. Economy boarding is through the second door." Marcus didn't move. He stood in the aisle, his presence heavy and grounded. "I believe you're using my table," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. "And I believe you're in my personal space." Preston stopped typing. The silence stretched for 3 seconds. He slowly turned his head, looking Marcus up and down. He took in the hoodie, the graying hair, the cheap watch. Preston let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You're joking, right?" Marcus held up his phone, displaying the boarding pass for 1B. Preston squinted at the screen. He looked at Marcus, then at the phone, then back at Marcus. He snatched the glass of water off the tray table, but he didn't apologize. "Upgrade?" Preston asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Airline employee flying non-rev?" "I paid for my ticket just like you," Marcus replied calmly, sliding his satchel under the seat. Preston scoffed, turning back to his screen. "Right. Lottery winner, then. Look, just do me a favor. I'm working on a deal worth more than your entire neighborhood. Try not to snore, and don't order anything that smells weird. I need focus." Marcus sat down. He adjusted his seatbelt. He didn't retort. He didn't get angry. He simply reached into his pocket, pulled out the black notebook and wrote, "Seat 1A. Verbal harassment of fellow passenger. Assumption of financial status based on appearance." The plane pushed back from the gate. The safety video began to play. Sarah, flight attendant. Sarah stood in the galley, securing the latches on the meal carts. She peered through the curtain. She could feel the tension radiating from row 1. It was like a static charge before a lightning strike. She had seen this dynamic before. Rich, entitled white man meets someone he thinks doesn't belong. Usually she would intervene. But Preston Vance was platinum elite. He had a direct line to the VP of Customer Experience. Last year, he had gotten a gate agent fired for looking at him the wrong way. Please, she prayed silently. Just let him sleep. Don't let this escalate. I have a mortgage. I can't afford a complaint on my file today. POV Preston, the antagonist. Preston stared at the spreadsheet on his laptop. The numbers weren't adding up. Horizon Tech was hiding something in their overhead costs. If he missed it, and the merger went through, he'd be exposing his firm to millions in liabilities. He could feel the heat coming from the man next to him. Why did the airline let people like that up here? It diluted the brand. First class was supposed to be a club, a sanctuary for the winners. Having this guy here looking like he just came from a shift at a garage ruined the psychology of it. It was a distraction. And Preston couldn't afford distractions. He glanced sideways. The man was reading a book. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Preston rolled his eyes. Great. A pseudo-intellectual. Probably took a community college philosophy course and thinks he's Plato. POV Marcus, the protagonist. Marcus felt the vibrations of the G90 engine spooling up. He closed his eyes listening. The port engine had a slight harmonic variance in the N1 turbine. Maybe 0.5% off the baseline. Nothing dangerous, just inefficient. Fuel burn would be higher than the projected models. He opened his eyes and looked at the man next to him. Preston Vance. Hedge fund manager. Marcus knew him, though Preston didn't know that. Marcus had read Preston's proposal to acquire Horizon Tech. It was a predatory dismantle and sell strategy. Marcus wasn't here to fight Preston. He was here to fail him. But he needed to see the character of the man first. In engineering, you stress test a material until it breaks to know its true value. Marcus decided to apply a little pressure. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Marcus stowed his book and placed a laptop on his tray table. It wasn't a sleek MacBook Air like Preston's. It was a thick, ruggedized ThinkPad, the kind used in industrial field sites. It looked like a brick. He booted it up. The screen filled with scrolling lines of code and a complex 3D wireframe of a wing structure. Preston, who had been trying to ignore Marcus, couldn't help himself. He glanced over. The visualization caught his eye. Learning to code? Preston asked. His voice was loud enough that Mrs. Abernathy across the aisle looked up from her magazine. Marcus kept typing. Running a simulation. Preston chuckled, shaking his head. It's never too late, I guess. My nephew is doing a boot camp for that stuff. Good money in IT support if you can stick with it. Just don't expect to be sitting in 1A on a tech support salary often. Marcus stopped typing. He turned his head slowly to face Preston. Mr. Vance, isn't it? Marcus asked. Preston blinked. He hadn't introduced himself. How do you know my name? I saw it on your bag tag, Marcus lied smoothly. It wasn't a lie, he had seen the tag. But he also knew it from the dossier. You seem very concerned with my career path. I'm concerned with standards, Preston replied, leaning back and crossing his legs, his shoe inches from Marcus's shin. You see, economics is a hierarchy. Some people provide the capital. Some people provide the labor. When the labor sits with the capital, it confuses the market. Is that so? Marcus asked, his expression unreadable. And what happens when the labor understands the machinery better than the capital does? Preston laughed, a sharp barking sound. Then you wake up from your dream, pal. The world runs on money, not grease. Preston turned back to his laptop, dismissing Marcus entirely. He hit a button to call the flight attendant. Sarah appeared instantly. Yes, Mr. Vance? Preston gestured vaguely at Marcus, talking about him as if he were a piece of luggage. Sarah, I need you to reseat me. The air quality over here is stifling. I'm trying to review confidential documents, and I don't feel comfortable with prying eyes. Sarah looked at the full cabin. Mr. Vance, the cabin is full. I can't move you. Then move him, Preston said, pointing a manicured finger at Marcus. Put him in business class. Or coach. Give him a voucher. He'll probably appreciate the extra cash more than the legroom. The cabin went silent. Mrs. Abernathy gasped audibly. Sarah's face flushed. Sir, I cannot move a passenger who has a valid ticket just because you... Preston cut her off. I'm not asking you, Sarah. I'm telling you. I am a Platinum Elite member. My firm practically owns this route. If you don't find a solution, I will call the CEO's office the moment we land, and you'll be serving peanuts on a regional jet by Tuesday. Do we understand each other? Sarah stood there trapped. She looked at Marcus, her eyes pleading for forgiveness. Marcus looked at Sarah. He saw the fear in her eyes. It was the fear of a single mother living paycheck to paycheck, terrified of a man who viewed her livelihood as a bargaining chip. That was the breaking point. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't stand up. He simply closed his laptop with a definitive snap. Sarah, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the tension like a razor. You don't need to answer him. He turned to Preston. The calm observer was gone. In his place was something colder, sharper. You think you know how the world runs, Mr. Vance, Marcus said. You think it runs on capital. But you're flying in a machine that keeps you alive at 35,000 feet because of aerodynamics, not your bank account. You want to talk about hierarchy? Let's talk about it. Preston looked stunned. Are you threatening me? Marcus smiled. It was not a nice smile. No. I'm analyzing you. And the data is looking very poor. Preston's face turned red. He slammed the call button repeatedly. Captain. I want the captain. This man is threatening a VIP. The air in the first-class cabin grew heavy. The skirmish was over. The war had just begun. The chime of the call button echoed in the cabin, sharp and insistent, like a summons to court. James, the purser, emerged from the galley. James was a man who had seen everything at 30,000 feet, from births to deaths to rock stars trashing bathrooms. He prided himself on his ability to diffuse tension with a sterile corporate smile. But as he approached row 1, his smile faltered. He saw Sarah standing near the bulkhead, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly behind her back to hide the fact that they were shaking. He saw Preston Vance in seat 1A, face flushed, finger hovering over the button again. And he saw the passenger in 1B, Mr. Thorne, sitting in absolute stillness, his eyes fixed on Preston with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a volatile chemical reaction. Is there a problem here, Mr. Vance? James asked, stepping between Sarah and the seats. His voice was smooth, practiced. Problem? Preston laughed. A harsh sound that lacked humor. That is an understatement, James. I am trying to conduct sensitive business. This flight is my office right now. And your employee here, Preston gestured at Sarah without looking at her, is refusing a reasonable request to curate the environment for your premium clients. James looked at Sarah, then at Marcus. Mr. Thorne, has there been an issue? Before Marcus could answer, Preston cut in. The issue, James, is compatibility. Look at him. Preston waved a hand toward Marcus's hoodie. He's obviously a non-revenue passenger. A mechanic using a buddy pass? A janitor? I don't care. But he is hostile. He's staring. He's invading my privacy. And frankly, his hygiene standards are distracting. The cabin went deadly silent. The accusation was gross, unfounded, and deeply racist in its subtext. Marcus smelled of nothing but clean soap and old paper. James stiffened. Mr. Vance, I must ask you to keep your voice down. Mr. Thorne is a full-fare passenger. We cannot move him simply because you then upgrade me to the cockpit for all I care. Preston snapped. Or move him to the jump seat. I don't care about the logistics. I pay for the brand promise. This, he pointed at Marcus, is a breach of contract. Marcus finally moved. He reached for his water glass, took a slow sip and set it down. James, Marcus said. His voice was calm, contrasting violently with Preston's manic energy. Yes, Mr. Thorne? James asked, relieved that the man wasn't shouting. Mr. Vance is under a great deal of stress, Marcus said. I believe his cortisol levels are affecting his judgment. Perhaps you should cut off his alcohol service. Preston's eyes bulged. Excuse me? You think you can tell the crew what to do? I'm suggesting a safety protocol, Marcus replied lightly. You seem unstable. Preston unbuckled his seatbelt. He started to stand up, his fists clenched. Sit down, sir. Sarah cried out, stepping forward instinctively. At that exact second, the plane dropped. It wasn't a gentle dip. It was a violent stomach-churning plunge as the aircraft hit a pocket of clear air turbulence over the Midwest. The floor fell away. Coffee cups jumped from trays. The overhead bins rattled with the sound of 1,000 marbles shaking in a jar. Preston, caught mid-rise, was thrown back into his seat. He gasped, grabbing the armrest so hard his knuckles turned white. His face drained of color. "We're going down!" Preston shrieked. "Jesus, we're crashing!" The lights flickered. The hum of the engines changed pitch, a deep, groaning roar as the autothrottle tried to compensate. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't grab the armrest. He didn't gasp. He reached out with his left hand and placed it flat on the wall of the cabin, feeling the vibrations. With his right hand he tapped a few keys on his thick ThinkPad laptop. Piovumers. Abernathy, Seat 2A. Eleanor Abernathy clutched her rosary beads. She hated turbulence. It reminded her of her own mortality. She looked across the aisle, expecting to see fear in the eyes of the two men in the front row. She saw the loud man, Mr. Vance, hyperventilating. He looked small now. Pathetic. All his bluster about money and power had evaporated the moment gravity asserted its dominance. But then she looked at the man in the hoodie. He was counting? No, not counting. He was watching the wing through the window. He looked at his watch. He looked at the laptop screen. He appeared to be conducting an orchestra that only he could hear. 3 degrees yaw, the man whispered. Spoilers extending into one. We heard a hydraulic whine zzz thunk from the wing. The plane shuddered once, violently, and then, as if a giant hand had steadied it, the movement stopped. The aircraft leveled out instantly. The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor stared. The man in the hoodie typed a final command and sat back, relaxing his shoulders. It was as if he knew the plane's future. POV Preston, the antagonist. Preston's heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He hated flying. He hated the lack of control. That was why he bought first class, to buy the illusion of safety, the illusion that he was removed from the chaos of the world. He looked over at Marcus. The man was calm. Too calm. How did you know that? Preston whispered, his voice trembling. Know what? Marcus asked, not looking up from his screen. The noise. The wing. You said it before it happened. Physics, Mr. Vance, Marcus said, closing a window on his screen. Fluid dynamics. The atmosphere is just an ocean of air. Waves are predictable if you know how to read the current. Preston's fear began to curdle back into anger. He felt foolish for screaming. He felt exposed. And he needed to blame someone for that exposure. You're using some kind of tracker, Preston accused, his voice gaining strength. That thing, he pointed at the rugged laptop. That's not a normal computer. You're hacking the flight data? Is that it? That's illegal. Marcus sighed. It was a long, tired exhale. It is a diagnostic tool. You're interfering with the plane. Preston shouted, seizing onto this new narrative. That's why we dropped. Your equipment is messing with the avionics. The fasten seatbelt sign stayed on, but the air smoothed out. James and Sarah moved through the cabin, checking on passengers. I want him off his electronics, Preston demanded as James walked by. He caused that drop. I saw him typing right when it happened, Sir James said, his patience wearing thin. We hit a thermal pocket. It's weather. It has nothing to do with laptops. Check his ID. Preston insisted. Have you actually vetted him? Or did he just slip through with a mobile pass? He doesn't fit the profile, James. You know what I'm talking about. Look at the passenger manifest. Google him. I bet you won't find a Marcus Thorne who can afford a $5,000 ticket. He's probably using a stolen credit card. James hesitated. He looked at Marcus. Mr. Thorne, James said apologetically. I'm terribly sorry, but to put Mr. Vance's mind at ease, could I just verify your ticket one more time? Marcus looked at James. He saw a man trying to keep the peace but doing so by appeasing the bully. It was the path of least resistance. It was how systems remained broken. You can check it, James, Marcus said softly. But understand what you are doing. You are validating his bias. You are telling him that his suspicion, based solely on my appearance, is worth more than my dignity as a paying customer. James flinched. He knew Marcus was right. But he also knew Preston was a Platinum Elite member who could ruin his month with a single email. Just quickly, sir. Please. Marcus pulled up the QR code on his phone again. James scanned it with his handheld device. The device beeped green. Passenger. Thorn/Marcus. Status. VIP/L4. Notes. Do not disturb. James blinked. CL4? He had never seen that code before. Usually it was P1 for Platinum or G1 for Gold. CL4 wasn't in the manual. Everything is in order, James said, frowning slightly at his device. His voice was confused. Preston snorted. Probably hacked the app too. James turned to Preston. Mr. Vance, his ticket is valid. He is a VIP status holder. I cannot do anything else. Dinner will be served shortly. James retreated to the galley, looking troubled. Preston leaned across the console. He lowered his voice, making it an intimate, conspiratorial whisper that was infinitely more insulting than a shout. How did you do it? Preston asked. Identity theft? Skimming cards at gas stations? You're good, I'll give you that. You almost look the part. Almost. But you see, true wealth whispers. You're trying too hard with the... What is that? The Stoic Act? The Meditations book? It's a costume. Marcus turned his head. He looked Preston in the eye. You are projecting, Mr. Vance, Marcus said. You are terrified that you are an imposter in your own life. You are worried about the Horizon Tech merger because you don't understand their technology. You are buying a company you can't run, hoping their engineers can save you from your own obsolescence. Preston went rigid. The blood drained from his face for the second time. How do you know about Horizon? Preston whispered. That deal is under NDA. It's not public. Marcus tapped the side of his head. I read. You're a corporate spy, Preston hissed. That's it. You're here to sabotage the deal. He slammed his hand on the call button again. Ding, ding, ding. Sarah appeared this time. Her face was pale. She had been crying in the galley. Her eyes were rimmed with red, but her jaw was set. Yes, Mr. Vance? This man is a corporate spy, Preston declared, his voice rising to a shout. He has admitted to possessing confidential information about my firm. This is corporate espionage. It is a federal crime to conduct illegal surveillance on an aircraft. I want the police waiting at LAX. And I want him moved to the back of the plane immediately for the safety of my intellectual property. Sir, Sarah said, her voice shaking but clear. Cannot move him. The flight is full. Then move a flight attendant. Preston yelled. Put him in a jump seat. Put him in the lavatory. I don't care. Preston stood up. He loomed over Sarah. He was a large man and he used his size to intimidate. If you don't move him right now, I am making the call. I know the VP of in-flight services. I have his personal cell number. I will call him and I will tell him that you, Sarah. He glanced at her name tag. Sarah Miller, refused to protect a Platinum client from a security threat. You will be fired before we touch the ground. Do you understand? You will lose your pension. You will lose your benefits. Is he worth it? He pointed at Marcus. Is this nobody worth your career? Sarah looked at Preston. Then she looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back at her. He didn't say a word. He didn't offer to move to save her. He waited. He needed to see what she would do. This was the test. Not for him but for the culture of the airline he had just bought. Time seemed to slow down. The hum of the engines was the only sound. Sarah took a deep breath. She straightened her spine. She remembered the training. She remembered why she took this job, to help people to keep them safe. Mr. Vance, Sarah said. Her voice was louder now. Authoritative. Sit down. Preston blinked. Excuse me? I said sit down, Sarah repeated. You are standing while the seatbelt sign is on. That is a safety violation. Furthermore, you are threatening a crew member. You are attempting to coerce me into violating company policy regarding passenger rights. Preston's mouth fell open. You listen to me, you little. No, you listen to me, Sarah interrupted, stepping forward. She raised her hand, palm out. Stop. I am issuing you a level 1 security warning. You are interfering with the duties of a flight crew. You are using abusive language and intimidation tactics. If you continue, I will escalate this to the captain, and we will have authorities meet the aircraft to escort you off. Not Mr. Thorne. You. Preston stared at her. He looked like he had been slapped. The power dynamic had shifted, and his brain couldn't process it. The help wasn't supposed to fight back. You wouldn't dare, Preston stammered. I'm Platinum. I don't care if you own the plane, Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly but holding firm. You do not treat people like that on my flight. Sit down. Preston looked around. He saw Mrs. Abernathy nodding in approval. He saw other passengers peering over their seats. He was losing the audience. He sank back into his seat, seething. He grabbed his phone. Fine, Preston spat. You want to play by the book? Let's play. He dialed a number. Preston put the phone to his ear. Yes, get me executive services. Now. It's Preston Vance. ID number 44902. I have a situation on flight 299. I have a rogue flight attendant and a passenger who is harassing me. I want them both detained. Yes, I'll hold. He looked at Sarah with a smug grin. It's over for you. Sarah stood her ground, but Marcus could see her hands shaking violently at her sides. She was terrified. She believed she had just thrown away her career. Marcus felt a profound sense of respect well up in his chest. She passed, he thought. He reached into his satchel. He didn't pull out a weapon or a badge. He pulled out a simple gray folder. Preston was talking loudly into the phone. Yes, I'm on the plane now. She's standing right here. No, the passenger is refusing to identify himself. He claims to be an engineer. He's obviously deranged. The cockpit door opened. Captain Miller stepped out. He was a man in his 50s, ex-Air Force, with silver hair and 4 gold stripes on his shoulder boards. He looked serious. James the purser was right behind him, looking pale. James pointed to row 1. Preston saw the captain and smiled. Finally, adults in the room. He lowered his phone but didn't hang up. Captain, over here. I have executive services on the line. I'm filing a formal complaint against your lead flight attendant. She threatened me. And this man, Preston pointed at Marcus, is a security risk. He has been making threats against my business and hacking the plane's Wi-Fi. Captain Miller adjusted his cap. He walked down the short aisle, his eyes scanning the scene. He looked at Sarah, who was holding back tears. He looked at Preston, who was smug and red-faced. And then he looked at Marcus. The captain stopped. He didn't look at Marcus with suspicion. He looked at him with confusion and then recognition. Preston didn't notice the look. He kept talking. Captain, I want this man restrained. He knows confidential details about my merger. He's clearly been sent to stalk me. It's unsafe. Remove him. Captain Miller ignored Preston. He took a step toward seat 1B. Preston grinned. That's right. Get him out of here. Captain Miller stood in front of Marcus. The cabin held its breath. Was Marcus about to be zip-tied? Was he about to be dragged off? Captain Miller cleared his throat. He looked at the thick, rugged laptop on Marcus's tray table. He looked at the scrolling code. Then the captain did something unthinkable. He stood at attention. Sir? Captain Miller said, his voice respectful, bordering on reverence. Preston's grin faltered. Sir? Why was the captain calling the stalker, sir? Marcus looked up from his screen. He closed the laptop slowly. He removed his glasses. Hello, Captain Miller, Marcus said. His voice was no longer soft. It was authoritative. It carried the weight of command. I wasn't informed you were on board, Dr. Thorne, Captain Miller said, a sheen of sweat appearing on his forehead. Operations didn't send a VIP notice. I didn't want them to, Marcus replied. I wanted to see how the airline operates when no one is watching. Preston lowered his phone slowly. The person on the other end was squawking. Hello? Mr. Vance. But Preston didn't hear it. Dr. Thorne? Preston whispered. Captain Miller turned to Preston. His face hardened. Mr. Vance, please hang up your phone. But Preston stammered. He's a spy. Captain Miller cut him off. Mr. Vance, the man you are accusing of hacking the plane is Dr. Marcus Thorne. He didn't hack the plane. He designed the avionics system we are currently flying on. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. Preston looked at Marcus. He looked at the hoodie. the old shoes, the meditations book, the rugged laptop. Marcus turned his chair slightly to face Preston. The invisible wall was gone. I'm not a spy, Preston, Marcus said. And I'm not IT support. Marcus tapped the gray folder on his desk. I'm the chairman of the board. My holding company acquired this airline on Tuesday. Preston dropped his phone. It hit the floor with a dull thud. The revelation hit Preston like a physical blow. His mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. Chairman? Preston squeaked. But, you're wearing my work clothes? Marcus finished the sentence for him. Yes, because I work. I don't just move money around, Preston. I build things. Marcus picked up the gray folder. And regarding your merger with Horizon Tech. Marcus continued, his voice icy. Preston looked at the folder. He recognized the logo on it. It was the Horizon Tech logo. You know them? Preston asked, his voice barely a whisper. Marcus opened the folder. I founded Horizon Tech 20 years ago, Preston. I'm the majority shareholder. The board sent me your acquisition proposal. Preston felt the blood leave his head. He felt dizzy. The man he had called a janitor. The man he had told to get out of the neighborhood. The man he had tried to kick off the plane. This man held Preston's entire career in his hands. I didn't know, Preston stammered. I was just, it's been a long day. I didn't mean. You didn't mean to insult the owner of the company you're trying to buy? Marcus asked. Or you didn't mean to insult a black man because you thought he was powerless? Marcus stood up. He was tall, imposing. He looked down at Preston Vance. Sarah, Marcus said, not looking away from Preston. Yes, sir? Sarah asked, her voice filled with awe. You issued a level 1 security warning to this passenger. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Is he still a threat to the crew? Sarah looked at Preston. She saw a man destroyed. But she remembered the way he had looked at her earlier. The way he had threatened her livelihood without a second thought. Yes, sir, Sarah said firmly. He is. Marcus nodded. Captain Miller, Marcus said. I believe federal regulations require us to remove any passenger who threatens a crew member. Is that right? Yes, Dr. Thorne, the captain said. We can divert to Chicago, or we can have authorities meet us in Los Angeles. Los Angeles will be fine, Marcus said. I don't want to delay the other passengers. He looked at Preston. You have 4 hours, Preston. I suggest you use the Wi-Fi to update your resume. Because when we land, I'm going to veto your merger. And then I'm going to have a long conversation with your firm's ethics committee about who they give platinum cards to. Preston slumped in his seat. He looked out the window. The clouds looked gray and cold. Marcus sat back down. He opened his book. Sarah, Marcus said gently. Yes, Mr. Chairman? Could I have a glass of water, please? Sarah smiled. It was a real smile this time. Right away, sir. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had shifted fundamentally. Before the revelation, the air had been thick with the frantic, jagged energy of Preston Vance. Now it was heavy with a suffocating silence. The plane was cruising at 38,000 feet over the Rockies, gliding smooth as glass. For Preston Vance, however, it felt like the walls were closing in. He sat in seat 1A, staring at the back of the seat in front of him. His hands were trembling slightly. He tried to hide them by clasping them in his lap, but the tremors were involuntary. His brain was racing, running simulations of the next 24 hours, and every single scenario ended in catastrophe. Marcus Thorne, the man he had threatened to have arrested, the man he had called a janitor, was sitting 3 feet away. Marcus had returned to his work. The thick ThinkPad was open again. He was typing steadily, the rhythmic click-clack of the keys sounding like a clock counting down the remaining minutes of Preston's career. Piovumers. Abernathy, seat 2A. Eleanor Abernathy sipped her Chardonnay. She had been flying first class since 1985. She had seen drunks, she had seen politicians, and she had seen rock stars. But she had never seen a takedown quite like this. She watched Preston out of the corner of her eye. The arrogance had drained out of him, leaving behind a frantic, sweaty desperation. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for his parents to come home. Then she looked at Dr. Thorne. He was immovable. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't smiling. He was simply working. It was the most dignified thing she had ever witnessed. She signaled to Sarah, the flight attendant. "Dear," Eleanor whispered when Sarah arrived. "Yes, Mrs. Abernathy?" Sarah's voice was lighter now, though her eyes still held the residue of adrenaline. "Bring the gentleman in 1B the dessert menu," Eleanor said. "And whatever he orders, put it on my tab." Sarah smiled. "I think Dr. Thorne owns the catering company too, Mrs. Abernathy. But the sentiment is lovely." POV Preston, the antagonist. Preston couldn't breathe. He loosened his tie. He needed to fix this. That was his job. He was a fixer. He was a closer. He closed deals. He managed crises. This was just another crisis. He looked at Marcus. The man was reasonable, surely. He was a businessman. Businessmen made deals. Emotions were for poor people. Rich people traded interests. Preston cleared his throat. It sounded like a gunshot in the quiet cabin. "Dr. Thorne," Preston began. His voice was hoarse. Marcus didn't stop typing. He didn't turn his head. "Dr. Thorne, look, I think we got off on the wrong foot." Preston tried again, forcing a chuckle that sounded like choking. "It's a high-stress environment. Flying. The altitude. It messes with your chemistry." Marcus stopped typing. He took a slow breath. He turned to face Preston. His expression was not angry. It was disappointed. "It wasn't the altitude, Preston," Marcus said. Preston seized the opening. I know. I was rude. I apologize. Sincerely. I was under a lot of pressure from the firm. This merger. Look, you know how it is. If I don't close this, the volatility in the market is going to crush my quarterly projections." Marcus stared at him. "You are worried about quarterly projections?" "Yes." Preston nodded eagerly. "You understand. You're a chairman. You have shareholders. We speak the same language." Marcus closed his laptop lid halfway. "We do not speak the same language," Marcus said softly. "You speak the language of extraction. You look at a company or a person and you ask, what can I take from this? You looked at Horizon Tech and saw a patent to strip mine. You looked at Sarah and saw a servant to command. You looked at me and saw a target to humiliate. That's not fair," Preston protested. "I didn't know who you were." Marcus leaned in. "That is exactly the point. You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me with basic human dignity. If I were a janitor as you assumed, would I deserve your abuse?" Preston stammered. I treat everyone with respect. I was just... You called the police on me," Preston. Marcus cut him off. "You tried to have me arrested for reading a book. You threatened a woman's livelihood because she wouldn't break federal law for you. That isn't stress. That is character. And character is a leading indicator of future performance." Preston felt the trap closing. "Look, Marcus, can I call you Marcus?" Preston asked, desperate to establish intimacy. "The Horizon deal. Let's separate the personal from the professional. My firm is offering 20% above market value. It's a win for you. Don't let a little airline spat kill a $100 million deal. That's bad business." Marcus opened his folder again. He pulled out a sheet of paper. It was a technical schematic. "It's not a spat, Preston. And it's not about the money." Marcus placed the schematic on the center console. It showed a complex diagram of a turbine engine cooling system. "Do you know what this is?" Marcus asked. Preston looked at the lines and circles. It looked like gibberish to him. "It's the tech? The automation thing? It is the thermal regulation bypass for the New Horizon engine," Marcus explained. "When I designed it, I built in a 30% redundancy safety margin. It costs an extra $400 per unit to manufacture." "Okay," Preston shrugged. "So, we can cut costs. That's what my firm does. We lean out the manufacturing." "Exactly," Marcus said. He pulled out another paper. This was a printout of an email. An email Preston had sent to his team 2 days ago. Marcus read from the paper. Subject: Cost analysis. If we acquire Horizon, we can remove the thermal redundancy. The failure rate only increases by 0.04%. Statistically acceptable risk. Preston went pale. "How do you have that email?" "I have access to the Horizon servers, Preston. I monitor all due diligence inquiries." Marcus looked up, his eyes hard. "You called a 0.04% increase in engine failure statistically acceptable." Preston swallowed hard. In finance it is. It's a numbers game. Marcus slammed his hand on the console. It was the first time he had raised his voice or shown physical aggression in 4 hours. The sound made Preston jump. People are not numbers. Marcus hissed. 0.04% is 1 in 2,500 flights. This airline flies 5,000 flights a day. That means 2 engines failing every single day. That is 2 planes full of mothers, fathers, children and grandparents dropping out of the sky because you wanted to save $400 on a cooling tube. Preston shrank back into his leather seat. You panic in turbulence, Preston, Marcus said, his voice dropping back to that terrifying calm. I saw you. The plane dropped 10 feet and you fell apart. You screamed. You blamed the pilot. You blamed me. You have zero tolerance for risk when it's your life on the line. Marcus tapped the schematic. But you are perfectly willing to gamble with other people's lives to boost your stock price. That is why I am vetoing the merger. Not because you were rude to me, but because you are dangerous. You lack the moral imagination to run an engineering company. Preston sat there stunned. The logic was watertight. He wasn't being punished for being a jerk. He was being punished for being incompetent. You can't do this, Preston whispered. My partners, they'll fire me. I know, Marcus said simply. And they should. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Miller. We are beginning our initial descent into Los Angeles International Airport. We ask that you return your seats to the upright position. We have a special priority clearance today, so we'll be on the ground shortly. Preston looked out the window. The sprawl of LA spread out beneath them, a grid of lights and smog. Usually this was his kingdom. Today it looked like a prison. Sarah walked through the cabin doing her final checks. She stopped at row 1. Mr. Vance, Sarah said, her voice professional but cold. I need your seat back up. And I need you to stow your laptop. Preston moved slowly like an old man. He closed his MacBook. The screen went black, reflecting his own haggard face. He looked at Sarah. Sarah, look, I can write you a check. For the trouble. Sarah paused. She looked at him with a mixture of pity and resolve. Mr. Vance, attempting to bribe a crew member is another federal offense. I suggest you stop talking. Preston clamped his mouth shut. The landing gear deployed with a heavy thud. The plane banked, lining up for runway 24 right. Marcus packed his satchel. He slid the ThinkPad into its protective sleeve. He placed the Moleskine notebook in his pocket. He looked composed, ready. The wheels touched the tarmac. The reverse thrusters roared. As the plane taxied toward the gate, Preston pulled out his phone. He turned it on. It instantly flooded with messages. New voicemail from Todd. Preston, what is going on? We just got a legal notice from Thorn Aerospace. They're killing the deal? Call me. New email from Board of Directors. Immediate suspension pending investigation. Preston stared at the screen. It was over. The algorithm of his life had crashed. The seatbelt sign pinged off. Usually this was the moment everyone jumped up to grab their bags. But today no one in first class moved. They all stayed seated, watching. Captain Miller's voice came over the speaker again. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated for one moment. We have authorities boarding the aircraft to escort a passenger off. Thank you for your patience. The front door opened. The cool, smoggy air of Los Angeles drifted in. 2 officers from the PAPD Port Authority Police Department stepped onto the plane. They were large, serious men with tactical vests. Behind them was a woman in a suit, the airline station manager. They walked into first class. Preston Vance? The lead officer asked. Preston didn't stand up. He looked at Marcus one last time. Please, Preston whispered. You can stop this. Just tell them it was a misunderstanding. Marcus stood up. He picked up his bag. It wasn't a misunderstanding, Preston. It was a revelation. Marcus nodded to the police. Officer, this is the man. The flight attendant, Ms. Miller, has the incident report ready. The officer looked at Preston. Sir, stand up. You are being detained for interference with a flight crew and creating a security disturbance aboard a commercial aircraft. Hands behind your back. Preston stood up shakily. The click of the handcuffs was loud in the quiet cabin. Wait! Preston shouted as they turned him toward the door. I have rights. I want my lawyer. You can call him from the precinct, the officer said. They marched him out. As he passed Mrs. Abernathy, she didn't look away. She raised her glass of water in a mock toast. Goodbye, Mr. Vance, she said. Try the bus next time. The rest of the passengers began to murmur. Someone in the second row started clapping. Then another. Soon the whole first-class cabin was applauding. It wasn't a raucous cheer. It was the steady rhythmic applause of justice served. The cabin emptied out. Marcus stayed behind. Sarah and James stood in the galley. They looked nervous. The adrenaline had worn off, and now the reality of corporate hierarchy was setting in. They were standing in front of the owner of the airline. Marcus walked into the galley. He put his bag down on the jump seat. Sarah, Marcus said. Sarah straightened up. Yes, Mr. Chairman? You look terrified, Marcus observed. Sarah hesitated. I yelled at a platinum member, sir. I threatened him. I know the policy says the customer is always right. Marcus shook his head. That policy is wrong. He walked over to the coffee maker and poured himself a cup. He didn't ask them to serve him. Sarah, James, Marcus said, turning to face them. I bought this airline because it has good bones. It has good routes. But a company is not planes and routes. A company is its culture. He took a sip of coffee. For too long, the culture here has been about fear. Fear of losing money. Fear of the elites. Fear of speaking up. Today, Sarah, you broke that culture. You chose to protect the dignity of a human being over the ego of a wealthy one. Sarah teared up. I was just so angry, sir. He was treating you like I didn't matter, Marcus finished. I know. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. It was heavy stock, matte black with silver lettering. I am creating a new department, Marcus said. Director of Passenger Standards and Crew Safety. It reports directly to me. No middle management. No VPs of sales getting in the way. He handed the card to Sarah. I want you to run it. Sarah stared at the card. Me? But I'm just a flight attendant. Marcus smiled. And I'm just an engineer. Titles don't matter, Sarah. Courage matters. You showed more leadership in that aisle today than Preston Vance has shown in his entire life. Do you accept? Sarah looked at James, who was grinning from ear to ear. She looked back at Marcus. Yes, sir. I accept. Good, Marcus said. First order of business. Rewrite the Platinum Elite Handbook. Anyone who abuses my crew loses their status. Permanently. Marcus walked up the jet bridge. The terminal was busy, filled with the noise of reunion and departure. He walked past the gate counter. He saw the agents working there, dealing with angry passengers, typing on outdated computers. He made a mental note. Upgrade terminal IT systems. Priority 1. He reached the curb. A black town car was waiting. A driver holding a sign that said Thorn. But Marcus walked past it. He walked to the taxi stand line. Mrs. Abernathy was standing there, waiting for a cab. She saw him and waved. Dr. Thorn. She called out. Mrs. Abernathy, Marcus nodded. Can I help you with your bag? He lifted her suitcase effortlessly into the trunk of an arriving yellow taxi. You know, Mrs. Abernathy said, leaning on her cane. I have to ask. You own the airline. You have billions of dollars. Why on earth are you flying commercial? Why aren't you on a private jet drinking champagne? Marcus opened the car door for her. He looked at the busy airport, at the families hugging, at the businessmen rushing, at the chaotic, beautiful mess of humanity. In a private jet, the air is stale, Mrs. Abernathy, Marcus said. You only hear what you want to hear. You only see people who are paid to agree with you. He smiled, a genuine warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. I fly commercial because I need to feel the turbulence. Keeps me honest. If I don't know what it feels like to be treated like a nobody, I can't be a good somebody. Mrs. Abernathy patted his cheek. You're a good man, Marcus Thorn. She got in the cab. Marcus closed the door. He took a deep breath of the smoggy Los Angeles air. He pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant. Yes, this is Marcus, he said into the phone. Draft the press release regarding the Horizon Tech merger. We're canceling it. And schedule a board meeting for tomorrow morning. Subject. A new direction. He hailed the next taxi. Where to? The driver asked, a man with a thick accent and a tired face. Headquarters, Marcus said. I have work to do. The taxi merged into traffic, disappearing into the sea of cars. Fade out. Text on screen. Dignity is not a luxury class item. It is a basic human right. Treat everyone like the CEO. You never know who they might be.